Welcome. We're presenting an event on strategies that we've come up with talking to hiring managers and just also our own experience in seeing candidates through the process of why you might want to relocate for work and how to go about researching relocation and what kind of packages you might be considering from hiring companies. So I'm Erin, I'm the outreach associate, and also on this call I have Beth. Now let her introduce herself.
Yeah, so I am part of the customer success team with Seismic, and my main role is to communicate on a daily basis with directly with hiring managers. So I get to speak with them on their goals for the roles that they have, what they're looking for, and then also I get to ask questions such as this. So we'll be able to have some great insight on move up from actual hiring managers as well.
Yes. So you'll hear both our voices. I'll be walking you through the candidate side of why you might want to move, how to research the area you might be moving to, research other companies in the area. And Beth will be taking over from what you might see from the hiring managers and what you might be able to negotiate as far as relocation. So just to reiterate, we're going to be going through the pros and cons of relocation, how to research and some tools that you can utilize. Then Beth will be taking over how to, once you have decided on potentially a role, how to relocate, how to negotiate relocation. And we'll close with hopefully ample time for Q&A. So first, I want to cover some of the good reasons to relocate, and this is specifically work related. I know there's also cases where you might be relocating to be closer to family or something, and work is kind of a secondary consideration. This is specifically why would you relocate for work? And the two big ones would be career advancement. So either say you have a very specialized skill or there's a very particular part of the biotech, biopharma, high-tech industry that you want to be a part of, and there's more opportunities for what you want to specialize in that area. Or if you're just getting started in the industry, you might be looking for areas where there's less demand for candidates with prior industry experience in the area. So there's going to be more opportunities for you to consider. The other one is if there's a really specific company that you want to work for and get in on ground level or mid-level and work your way up and stay with that company for a long time. The other aspect is quality of life. I would say something I'll focus on as we go through is it's not necessarily living to work, it's working to live. And also it's about looking for areas where potentially there's more affordable living for the life that you want, or more activities outside of work offered that appeal to you. Just some definitions for what we might be, words we might be throwing around just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. We'll be talking a lot about hubs and emerging hubs. Hubs are, when you think of areas that are rich in biotech, these are probably the regions that spring to mind. They're areas with traditionally very high numbers of biotech, but also there's an established infrastructure of funding opportunities, things like third-party resources as well to support them. And those would be places like the Cambridge, Boston area, San Francisco, Los Angeles, the ones you can see on this map that are the very, very high numbers. This is also an interesting site to go around and look at if you're trying to get a sense of just total numbers that are reported in the area. Emerging hubs are very interesting. They're areas where there actually are quite a few number of companies, not as many, but there's a big push of local and governmental investment in turning the area into the next biotech hub. So there's opportunities that are emerging and really encouraged to emerge, but it's not going to be as dense as far as opportunities, and there might not be that third-party infrastructure in there already to support the companies. And those are places like Chicago, Philadelphia, Dallas, Fort Worth. But really any of these clusters that you're looking at here could potentially count as an emerging hub if they're not these very high numbers. So broadly, I think the best way to start this out is for pros and cons, framing it as these hubs and emerging hubs. What's the benefit of moving from a non-hub area to a hub area? And maybe you're already in a hub area and it's really crowded and you want to move to more one of the emerging hubs. What do those two directions look like? The first, moving to a hub area, the major pro is there's going to be a denser amount of opportunities. And there's going to be a lot of networking options should your situation change. If you join a company and find out it's not the ideal environment for you and you want to start looking again in a year or so, then there's going to be other opportunities in the area that you can find easily. But then there's usually competition. The pro of this competition for the same talent from many, many companies is sometimes, not always, sometimes it can lead to stronger benefit packages that will be offered to you from companies that want to stand out to strong candidates. And there's also going to be a large number of opportunities for collaboration. If you're in an area where it's, say an incubator space or just a campus with a lot of companies, you're going to be able to meet and network with a lot of other professionals in your field and build that network. The cons are they're typically in cities with a higher cost of living. And there's also that aspect of competition. Because they're so recognized for the field, there's people who are looking to relocate specifically to these areas to build their career. So there can be a lot of competition for you if you don't have a lot of industry experience. Versus if you're moving to an emerging hub, they typically have lower costs of living. They'll still mostly be larger cities, but not as high cost. There's going to be potentially lower competition for roles. Yes, there will be less roles, but because they're not first and foremost as a hub area, there's going to be a lower concentration of scientists already there or scientists who are willing to relocate to those areas. So they can be a good opportunity to build yourself as an expert in the field. If there's a particular therapy, a particular technique you want to become very, very well versed in and build your career around, it's a good opportunity to move in there, gain that skill, and then become one of the mainstays in the area with that expertise. The cons, as I mentioned, typically less opportunities should an offer not work out. Again, if you're looking to move in a year or 2 years to another company, there's going to be less competitors there to consider. And sometimes they're not always able to offer as high a compensation package. As we'll go through cost-wise, this can sometimes work out if it's a city with an already lower cost of living. But just if you're moving from a hub to an emerging hub, the sticker shock of a role that's less money than you're making now, that's something that definitely we've heard and noted before. The other relocation considerations that we'll touch on as we go through the strategy section, family is a big consideration, we know, for some people. There's distance from a support system potentially. I know that, for myself, being a drive away from a family member versus having to take a flight is something that certainly weighs on me in considering relocation. If you have a partner, if there's employment opportunities for them in their field in the area, and if you have children or dependents, what's the school system like in the area? I also want to note before we go into strategies that while what we're going to cover strategy-wise, works for any relocation as far as what opportunities are available in the city, what things you should be considering. I know that some people are going to have work authorization as a consideration as well, especially if you're relocating from another country versus a state-to-state relocation. The thing I want to reiterate is our expertise is not in law, it's not in immigration law. And we recognize that even though we can share individual stories of how it might have gone for candidates, no two-person situations are identical. And so we really encourage you to keep that in mind, and find the resources that will best benefit you. Whether that, if that's an immigration lawyer or something that's offered through your campus. We've also included a link for visa information from the Department of State as well. But again, the relocation research we're going to cover here should be generally applicable to everybody. The first big thing to consider is the cost of living versus salary. Keeping in mind that if you're moving from a very high cost area, a decrease in salary could lead to maintaining or even increasing quality of life in a new area. Coming back to the idea of it's, working to live, not living to work. Just some options that I want to show you how they work. This is best places. This one does housing. It is very homeowner specific. So let's say you live in Boston right now, and you're considering Philadelphia. Let's say making, let's say 60,000 as a research associate. I'm just throwing out some options. Calculate. You can see that the same salary that you have because of the equivalent one in Philadelphia, if you could get the same salary or even just a tiny bit lower, you could have a better or even at least maintaining cost of the quality of life. And you can also see broken down by food and groceries, home ownership, where primarily that salary estimate is coming from. So example, for this one, it's mostly home ownership. And the other aspects are identical, with like health being actually a little bit higher in Philadelphia. And so if you're not looking for home ownership, maybe that's not so advantageous for you, because that lower cost of living is coming primarily from the home costs. We also know rental is also another option. Let's see the same one here so I can just show you the difference. Let's say Boston. Let's say Philadelphia. 60,000. You'll see they give you about the same, so that's a good agreement, but they'll also give you 2-bedroom versus home prices as well. And you can also see things like entertainment costs and schools comparison as well. We'll show you a better tool for how to evaluate schools on another slide, but you can get some quick research done here, especially if you're being asked to give an estimated salary and you just want to do a quick calculation. These are good kind of cursory option. Just again, that only shows 2-bedroom. If you're specifically looking for rentals, you can also look up fair market rent prices. So we can, again, I'll move off Philadelphia after the other example. I just want to show between the 3 of these comparisons. Philadelphia County. This one has to do county rather than city. But this one you can see broken down by zip code, and it gives you more than just 2-bedroom. It'll give you 1-bedroom, 3-bedroom. And so I think this is helpful because, as you saw in the other one, they can say, oh, average across all Philadelphia, say, is about $1,700 for a 2-bedroom. Here you can see where it's higher and where it's lower based on where you would be looking to live. Another big state to state difference, which is going to impact your salary and how much you can take home, is going to be taxes. Three big major ones to consider would be sales, property, if you're looking for home ownership, and income probably being the most impactful. Some links to consider and how they work. For state and local sales tax rates, you can scroll down and you can see what the average local sales tax is for each state, and which states don't have sales tax, like a New Hampshire. Property is going to be a little more difficult because you're going to have to base it on an assessed home value. So here I've put in, for example, Seattle, Washington. Houses are pretty expensive, as I understand it, Seattle. But you can see the average county tax rate and then an estimated property taxes. You can see it based on the state and then based on national. Another example, maybe in a more affordable region, let's say Cincinnati, Ohio, close to me. Yeah, so again, Hamilton County, you get the county tax rate, you get the property taxes, you get this average state, you get the average national. And as I said, I think the one that's going to most impact your salary is going to be the income tax. Keep in mind, some states have brackets, some states do a flat rate. They have an initial list of states with no income tax, with a flat tax, and then ones that have bracketed or graduated tax rates. It's an easy one to just see the initial ones that don't have income tax, like Florida, Texas. Those are big. Those are states that have big emerging biotech hubs. So that's definitely something that might come into play with the salary that you're offered, is that they don't have income tax. For the ones that have brackets, they do, if you want to do a deeper dive, they do list all of the brackets percentiles based on your gross salary. And again, for a quick glance, a quick calculation of how much will I actually be taking home with my salary, my current location versus new location, that's good for a cursory research, especially when you're having to turn around and talk to the company quickly and give them an estimate of what you're asking for. We'll get into now some of the additional things. The first one is, how easy is it to get around? If you're used to a city where you can accomplish most things on foot, a consideration of whether, how walkable, how bikeable is a city, and whether you'll likely need a car or not is something to consider. So I have in Kansas City, Kansas, which does have some, but you can see, does have some biotech, but as you can see, as far as walkable, bike score, if you were moving to here from a hub, you would most likely need to have a car versus, I think we all probably know New York is probably going to come up as one where you don't really need a car. Yeah, you don't necessarily want to bike. It could be a little dangerous, but the public transit, and it's very, very walkable. Most errands it recommends accomplished on foot. Boston, again, high walk score, high transit score, somewhat bike friendly. They also offer things about reviews of neighborhoods and pictures and places, just so you get a sense of whether the local attractions and landmarks, highlights are things that are in line with what you're looking for as a place to settle. Mentioned if you're moving with family, I know finding a school is a big stress point. This is a good way to quickly look at through the governmental reporting what districts look like in the area. Let's say Denver. So you have all the districts. You can pull out, and they do include like charter schools as well as public schools as well. Let's go with just public school Denver 1. You can get the full grade span. They go kindergarten through 12th grade. You get the district size. You get total students. The FTE is essentially a measure of how many teachers. It's you might see a point something, but that's including people who are like substitutes or not full-time. So essentially 1 is 1 full-time teacher. So that's how they calculate. You can also see classroom teacher to student ratio, and you can find all of the content contacts, things like data and grants as well. Get you a sense of what's available in the area. The other thing to consider beyond just like the basics, you have a car, do you not have a car, home, rental, schools, it's work-life balance. What you do outside of work, I think, is just as important as what you do for work, as far as how satisfied you are with a region. So we have some options for how you can find out if the recreation activities in the area appeal to you. This is a ranking of, it only includes the top 100 most populous cities in the US. Unfortunately, it's not comprehensive, but it will give you a measure of parks, average weather, and entertainment and recreation. They break down as like music venues, movie theaters, sports as well. And it's based more on per capita than actual individual rankings. So somewhat of the quality of parks is based on the acreage of the parks, for example. The entertainment somewhat based on how many music venues versus like the rating of the quality. But it's a good overall look at, if you know that you prefer parks, looking at areas that have lots of city park systems versus those that don't have that many city park systems. It's a good cursory glance of what is going to be most appealing as far as recreation for you in the area and what's offered. I also recommend checking the city's official webpage. It's going to be somewhat biased because it's the city trying to attract you there, but they're going to focus on their top selling points. For example, if the city's official website is like, come enjoy our nightlife, come enjoy our music venues, and you're an outdoorsy person, maybe not the best option, because they're going to focus on their strengths and they're not going to mention the areas that they're weaker in. So they're not going to honestly say like, oh, we don't have a great park system, but they're going to highlight things that they think that they're strong in. And you can get a sense of what they're highlighting that they're strong in. Is this something that's aligned with what I want? For food, I got to be kind of basic and say like Yelp and Google reviews are going to be most helpful, just seeing what's in the area and what the primary cuisines are. For interest groups, I think it can be helpful if you have something you want to be heavily involved with. I think Meetup in particular, having a look at what the groups in the area are is very helpful because it's so heavily focused on meeting up in person to do things. Things like bowling groups, hiking groups, indoor climbing groups, just some of those things. If they're listed in the local area, then there's going to be people in the area who are interested in that recreation that you can connect with, versus if it's not, maybe, there's always options to connect online with people, but I like resources where there's an emphasis on our people who have these interests local. Yeah, I know before we close, I want to focus heavily on opportunities because, I saw from the chat that opportunities are a big focus. As if I move to this area, is there an opportunity for career growth, or am I going to have to move again in a few years? A big question is, if a job doesn't work out, can you find other options in the area? And we've somewhat covered this in another event, but I do want to touch on it here as well. When you go to LinkedIn and you click on a company, so there's a company in the area you're interested in applying to, or you have an interview with, and you're starting to think, would I actually relocate to secure this job? If you're on the company's LinkedIn, on the sidebar, they'll have similar companies. If you look through those and see, are any of them local? Are any of them in the same region as this company that's been flagged as similar? Or are they all in other states? And that can give you a sense of, are there competitors in the area that I could easily move over to if this opportunity doesn't work out? Crunchbase.com, they'll have a panel that is competitors. I think it's specifically called competitors. And you can look at, for the company that you're interested in, again, who are their major competitors? And they have a pretty solid list, and flag any of the ones that are local within the region that you're moving to. And then are there enough alternative opportunities there that you would feel comfortable making a semi-permanent move to the area? If you just want to get a sense of like what the biotech environment or pharma environment like is in the state, you can look at industry news sites like Biospace, Fierce Biotech, many others, and search by the state and see what are the top research priorities in the states. There's going to be some states that are very, very medical device focused. There are going to be states that are very, very ag tech focused, and states that are very cell and gene therapy focused. Are those regions aligned with those hubs or emerging hubs, aligned with what you want to pursue career-wise? Or are you going to be kind of a niche, kind of joining a niche company in an area that's not rich in those opportunities? I have this listed as once there. So some things you can do once there to build your network and find other opportunities as well. But you can also do this first one as part of this initial finding other opportunities in the area. Most every state has a bio affiliate. Sometimes they're not going to necessarily be named that way. For example, I can show you. BioHive is Utah's one, for example. I think it will still come up if you type in Bio Utah, but it will give you a lot of options of what are they reporting are the major investments in the industry in the area, who are the companies who are involved, and it'll give it. It's a good thing to be involved in once you're there if you're looking to grow your network and really become ingrained with the industry in the area. But it's also, I said, it can also be used in this research phase if you're trying to figure out what other opportunities are in the area, what are the strengths of this area as far as industry, and does it align with what I want? Also, Eventbrite pages can be helpful. Some of these groups will also put up networking or mingling events on the site as well. If you're in person, if you're not working remotely, incubator spaces for startups, shared offices, research campuses are a good way to get involved in person as well. And in some of the time that you have, I encourage you, especially if you're at like an incubator that's doing live events, to attend some of those and get to know who the other companies are that are in your proximity, and build connections with some of the other professionals that are in your field that can lead to those other opportunities down the line, if that's something that if that's a concern that you want to consider. I'm now going to hand it over to Beth to talk about the hiring manager side and give you a little bit of insight into what a relocation package would look like. I think we see companies that might, on a job description say, relocation, some relocation assistance available, but it's not specifically spelled out. What do those packages typically or not so typically look like, and what things could you potentially negotiate for?
Yeah, so some of the things to expect, a lot of the times companies may not have a quote unquote relocation assistance package. They may have it labeled as more of a sign-on bonus. This is used for relocation and other expenses that you would need to relocate. I spoke with a few companies on what their relocation packages or their sign-on bonus packages entailed. So a couple companies that we spoke to said between 5 and 10,000. So it depends on where you're relocating from, whether it's from out of the US, so maybe from Canada or Mexico. With this, it's a little bit more simpler than if you were moving from overseas. But this would be a single payment of that 5,000 to 10,000, and that would be discussed individually. So it's not going to be a blanket, every candidate who's relocating will get this. There are more basic packages. It really just depends on the size of the company and what they are willing to offer right off the bat. Some of these companies, you may need to sign a contingency saying that you'll be employed for 12 months because they are giving you that bonus to be able to relocate. So they are giving you that extra on top of the salary that you're already be getting for that allotted time for that move.
Yeah, and those would be mostly for the sign-on bonuses or the lump sum payments, rather than the itemized would typically be the ones that have the contingency attached.
Exactly. So some things that may be covered are storage costs. So if you need to move more of your things ahead of time, some companies may cover a storage fee. This is usually limited to a certain amount of days, maybe 30, maybe a month, maybe a few weeks, depending on what you have discussed with that company particular. So like Erin had said before, no two cases are going to be the same. Lease cancellation fee. So if you're currently leasing before you relocate or renting before you relocate, they may have a lease cancellation fee, and some companies will help cover that if it's maybe a full coverage or partial coverage, but it's definitely something to discuss. And these are also things to talk to the hiring companies about. So it's not necessarily something that you can just assume. This is where you have to advocate for yourself, saying, I am taking this risk relocating. What can you offer me to make sure that it is a successful relocation? House finding trips. So if you have to fly out or drive or anything, they would cover the cost of flying or traveling at all. Maybe a hotel stay. rental finding assistance. So sometimes they have a lot of other places that they know in that particular area of where you could find housing or other things that may help you relocate to in a home versus having to kind of do that all on your own. So they would have a lot of opportunities for you as well. Some things to ask about as well is an incentive bonus. So this might also be part of that sign-on bonus. So if they are really, really wanting you to join their company because maybe you're moving to an emerging hub and they need a specialist, and you are a scientist that is doing that, you can ask about an incentive bonus. So if you're saying, you know, this salary, I agreed to it, but you know, with moving and, you know, moving my whole family or whatever kind of situation you're in, ask about that incentive bonus. It's not going to stop them from wanting you to take the job or to offer you. So these are things to definitely advocate for yourself. Transportation fund. A lot of companies, like in Boston, even in New Jersey, they are aware that transportation is most likely going to be like public transit or you know, biking or walking rather than taking, you know, your own car or carpooling. So a lot of companies will have an allotment of a transportation fund. So let's say, you know, $100 a month, and they have calculated that out so that you will have transportation costs covered, or they'll repay you, or however it may be set up. And every company is different. Any kind of free meals. So if they have like a break room where you can have lunch or breakfast, or they have a regular meeting where you can have that breakfast or anything like that, anything to give you that added bonus are things to ask about in terms of needing to relocate. Maternity and paternity leave is very important. A lot of companies do offer that, but it is one of those things that if you are moving to an emerging hub and something comes up, or family planning in general, definitely make sure you're aware of their maternity and paternity leave, as well as childcare. So if they have free childcare, or if they know of any good childcare facilities, you know, preschools, daycares, and then as Erin showed, you can look at the school districts and schools. These are all things to ask about when you're talking with the hiring team, because even if you're doing the research to find the school districts or the schools, they may have, you know, they're living in that area, so they may have a better understanding of what schools would be top priority.
Yeah, and as Beth was saying, it's not necessarily that all of this is always offered, but it also doesn't hurt to ask, especially if you're moving to a hub where your salary is going to be a little bit lower than national. These are definitely things that you can advocate for and ask for. It's better to get a yes or no and be able to make an informed decision about the company that you're joining and whether they have what you want, rather than hoping that they offer it.
Yeah. And then another thing that's important is planning. So you want to think of your timeline to moving. So a lot of companies will ask, like, well, what's your earliest start date? And that's when you would have to think of, if you can arrive a couple weeks to a month early, that would be ideal, because that gives you time to address the area, get your bearings on housing. If you have your family with you, get bearings on what your children might need or your spouse might need. Packing, transit, unpacking, having an idea. You know, things change, things come up. So just having an idea will definitely be helpful, and it'll make it so you kind of have that goal in your head, and that way you're not necessarily blindsided by anything when you're doing that move. Don't rely heavily on temporary housing. So if you are staying with a friend or staying with family for a little bit while you're getting, you're moving underway, I would say limit that as short as possible. So that way it's less stress on you, less stress on family and friends, less stress on just because you're starting a new job at that time as well. So starting a new job and relying on family and friends can be a big stressor. So it's all a part of that, work-life balance. Calculating expected costs early, so you have an idea. This is all about having an idea and just being prepared. Like I said, things can change, but at least you have a goal, or you have that image in your brain of what you can and can't afford. Thinking long-term is very important. When you are thinking long-term about relocation, we usually say, because these companies, they are taking a large chance, they're giving you that sign-on bonus, they're helping with that relocation assistance. Even if they're not technically offering relocation assistance, they're still taking a big chance on you coming from out of the area, because you could come from out of the area and then change your mind, or something may not work out, and then they are out of an employee as well. So they want to make it work as just as much as you want to make it work. So we usually say, don't make any rash decisions right away. Obviously, yourself, if something is not working out that immediate, that first month, give it a little bit more time. Think long term. So is it going to be 5, 10? Is it a permanent move? One thing that I can share, my dad, he relocated a couple years ago, and he relocated to a specific city, but then realized that city wasn't the best. He was able to keep this job because he was able to get a better bearing of around the area. So then he kept moving to different cities until he found the city that worked best. He never quit the job or anything. He stayed with that job. So you don't have to stay in that housing or in that area. Once you move, you can move to the surrounding areas, whatever you're comfortable with, but still think long term. When you're thinking about relocating or interviewing with companies, is this a company that I can see myself staying at for the next 5 years? Where do I see myself in the next 5, 10 years? So having that general plan and idea of what you're really wanting for your career is very important.
Yeah, and I would reiterate for the research area is important too. And I think having that number in mind is helpful as you're looking at what all the area offers, what other opportunities are there, asking yourself, could I live here for 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
And trusting your gut instinct and not talking yourself into something that your gut's telling you, I don't feel so good about this area.
Yeah. And a lot of that will be, you can kind of tell when you visit for on-sites, especially if you're coming out of the area, they'll usually have you stay a few days and kind of break it up, because they know that you are traveling from out of the area, and it can't be something where you can just drive on site, stay there for the day, do a presentation, meet the team, and then drive home. So a lot of that can be discussed and figured out when you go for that, for like testing the waters essentially. And during that time, I do recommend, going out to restaurants in the area, asking some of the team members, where are the best places to go, so you can test it out while you're there, even if it's just for an on-site and you haven't accepted the job offer yet, or they haven't even offered you yet. It's still nice to have that, game plan in your head, an idea of what you're looking at if you were to accept that offer, because guaranteed they will offer you when you're already home. So then you're relying on, pictures that you took or things in your brain and memory. So kind of having that thinking ahead notion is very important. And it's super important to think it's a marathon, not a sprint. So a lot of this is going to be happening over a longer course of time. So giving yourself time to adjust is very important. So it's taking care of yourself and your well-being, as well as giving yourself time to adjust to the new role and to learn. Anytime you start a new job, you have that grace period of, you don't really know what's going on, but you're learning a lot. And it's the same exact thing. It's just with relocation, now it's a whole new area for you to get in touch with and learn about. So setting that plan will be very helpful in the long run. Figuring out what to do with time away from work. So on the weekends, if you're not working weekends, or even nightlife, anything like that, going on walks through your neighborhoods, looking at festivals. So if they have posters throughout the town saying there's an antique fair, or it's almost Halloween time, there's a haunted house, go in and do those things and get out of your comfort zone a little bit, just so you have an idea of what you can be doing around the area. So like area attractions, if there's particular stores that some of your new coworkers are recommending, go check them out, go to the movie theater, things like that. If possible, start with something more temporary like renting. So you wouldn't go right off the bat and buy a home, because, like my example with my dad, he didn't right off the bat buy a home because he knew that he was going to be testing out these different cities. So whether you stay in a different city or town for a month or a couple months, renting or leasing is a better way to go. If you've already been to the area and like this is where I want to be, then obviously yourself best, go with your gut. If this is someplace that you're going to stay for a long time because you're relocating to get closer to family or anything like that, then obviously, look into buying those homes or anything like that. But setting down your roots slowly at first is highly recommended, because then it's a less of an added stressor, since you are starting your new role at that point as well.